Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. Gain valuable insights by attending the podcast, then complete the assessment test to download your certificate. To do this, follow these simple steps. Click on the link in your description to access the session. Create a free account and attend the podcast. After the podcast, take the assessment test and download your certificate. It's easy, and it's free. We highly recommend checking out our subscription.
So it's all of that evaluation is all tied to performance, right? So what mechanisms do you have in place to be able to capture, assess, and evaluate the talent at CBRE?
Yeah, so we have a tool that we call Talent Coach. I don't know the underlying software, to be honest. It may be an Oracle software. I don't think it is though. But like most companies, you input your goals, and that's all well and good. But for us, the biggest factor is tracking against those goals frequently, right? I would say minimum quarterly. You want the employee to be inputting into the tool what the progress is. We've got a little slider bar that shows kind of percent progress. You can upload attachments, etc. And you want the manager to also be inputting, say, hey, John did a great job with this assignment. The client gave a lot of kudos about it, and doing it more in real time, because the last thing that you want is any surprises at the end of the year,
right,
with the performance review process. And so, we expect people to be in that tool frequently. I mean, not daily, right? I mean, you don't have progress against an annual goal on a daily basis, but, I'd say at least quarterly. And then we have, of course, a performance rating, 1 through 5, 1 being basically did not meet any goals, 5 being wildly exceeded expectations. We have probably more of a what's not distended bell curve, but a skewed bell curve towards the 3 and the 4.
Hello, and welcome to HR Talk, unpacking trends and talent innovations, our monthly dive into the evolving world of human resources and talent management. In an era where companies are more digital, decentralized, and diverse than ever, HR isn't just about hiring and firing, it's about forging the future. I'm Aileen Zaballero, and for today's podcast, we're going to focus on talent engagement, one leader's perspective from the real estate services company, CBRE. With us today, we're fortunate to have John Richard, a senior managing director at CBRE, where he's worked for almost 20 years. John has had many roles at the company, from real estate transaction management to corporate strategy, and to the regional account leader for a large account in the energy sector with over 300 people. In his current role, John is responsible for client relationships, growth and strategy for CBRE's fast-growing energy and resource sector. John currently lives in the windy city of Chicago with his wife and 2 teenage children. A quick disclaimer: the opinions and comments expressed here by John Richard are his own and do not represent the views or positions of CBRE or its affiliates. With that, let's get started. Okay, John, thank you for agreeing to be on our podcast. I provided a brief introduction about you, but for our listeners, can you share a little bit about yourself? I know that in the past couple of years, you've transitioned from Dallas to the south side of Chicago. So how has that been? And then also a little bit about the work that you do.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Lean. So hi, everybody. My name is John Richard. I am a senior managing director with CBRE, which, for those of you who don't know, is the largest real estate services and investment company in the world. I've been with them for almost 20 years at this point now. I've spent most of that time in Dallas. I did spend a bit at the beginning of my career in Fairfax, Virginia. I've had a lot of different roles within the company, including real estate transactions, portfolio strategy, corporate strategy, I spent some would call it hard labor in IT, but it was a great learning experience, and have moved back into managing some of our larger accounts. So the aspect of the business I support today is what's called global workplace solutions. And so that means for large corporate clients, like take the Microsofts of the world, the Bank of Americas of the world, the Exxon Mobils of the world, we manage their real estate for them. And that's everything from finding the real estate to building out the space to maintaining the space. And my role today is in what's called our energy and resources sector. So focusing on those large energy and mining clients. And I am a growth and strategy leader, so focused on how do we keep growing, which I think is going to be part of what we talk about today. And yes, I did just recently move to the south side of Chicago, which has been a bit of a shock for a boy who grew up in South Texas, I must say. But my wife got a great opportunity at the University of Chicago, and as many say, happy wife, happy life. So we are in Chicago now. And I got to say, best food of any city I've ever lived in. And I've lived in Houston, Dallas, Boston, DC. Best food. The problem is it's very hard to get there because the traffic is so bad, but still best food.
Yeah, so I did a quick search on some funny quips between Dallas and Chicago. And there's a few of them that came up was pretty funny. The one that I like the most is because the past 7 days I was there, it went from 14 degrees to 60 degrees. In Dallas, boots bling go with everything. In Chicago, layering up is considered an art form due to the unpredictable weather.
Yep. No, that's so true. Last Sunday, I was in shorts. I was walking around the University of Chicago campus,
Yeah.
giving a tour to some of our friends. And then the very next day, it was down to back in the 30s and 40s and miserable. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep. And then you talking about foodie, right?
love
The other
food.
one I thought was funny is in Dallas, barbecue is a food group and a weekend activity. In Chicago, deep dish is not just a pizza, it's a lifestyle.
That's
And
funny. I would definitely agree with the first statement. I'm still warming up to deep dish, so I'll
I
get
could
there
do
at
a
some
warm up.
point.
Deep dish is the best. Okay, well, let's get started. Before we get into the meat of this podcast, can you share a little bit more about CBRE? Who are they? What is their global reach? And then, you already talked about how long you've been there, but tell a little bit more about what CBRE is all about.
Yeah, great. So, yeah, I've been with the company almost 20 years now and have seen it grow from a relatively modest sized company of 15, 20,000 people to now a global behemoth of 130,000 people plus.
Wow.
So, as I mentioned, we're the world's largest real estate services and investment firm, and we are in over 100 countries, and that's really been driven by our clients, right? Our clients want us to be wherever they are, whenever they need us, and so that has really, accelerated our growth. Um, and it's great, right? Because we're able to do so much more for our global clients than we have been in the past. But with that certainly comes challenges. It used to be that when I was growing up in the company, I mean, I started to get to know different people, and I would say, there's the old six degrees of separation of Kevin Bacon story, right? Like you can find anybody in the world within 6 degrees of separation. Um, for me at the time, it was kind of 3 degrees of separation. I could find anybody in the company who I needed to talk to within 3 phone calls, right? Now it's gotten a bit harder. It's still easier for me as somebody who's been in the company 20 years, but for someone coming in new, it's daunting. It's overwhelming, right? And so that's something that, I think is a real challenge for us as we continue to scale. Our CEO, Bob Solinik, who's been the CEO for quite a while, great leader. I've known him pretty much ever since he recruited me out of business school in 2005. He thinks about those challenges too, right? Because Wall Street has expectations that we keep growing 10 to 15% every year, right? So, well, guess what? That means we're adding 20,000 people every year, right? We're a services business. We don't produce widgets. We don't produce, we have a little
Wow.
bit of IP, but our business is our people. And so, um, to keep growing, we have to add people, and we got to make sure that they are prepared for being able to serve our clients in the best way possible. And that includes all the different services that we offer, from, as I mentioned earlier, the find, build, maintain part of our portfolio, part of our services. And it's getting harder and harder to know all the experts in the company who can bring that expertise to our clients. So that's where we are today. We certainly want to keep growing at the same pace, but we've got to be able to. There's a saying, "What got us here won't get us there," right? And
Right.
I think we're at that point where we really have to think long and hard about leveraging new technology, right? Leveraging AI, leveraging. I mean, obviously Zoom, right? We're on Zoom. I mean, that's been a big help in us connecting with people globally. But we have to keep evolving. We have to keep thinking about what ways to do things differently. So,
Do you want to earn CPE credit? Take this course of MyCPE 1 to earn free credit. Click the link in the description to get started.
Well, that's a great transition into the question, and what you kind of attuned to is the idea of the challenges. So share some of the primary challenges in managing such a large company. I mean, you're saying in 100 countries, right?
yep.
So being able to retain talent on your team, what is that like, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, so I'll talk about it from the standpoint of, our global workplace solutions business, which, and just to be clear, so within our company, we have three main lines of business. One is real estate investments, right? We have $150 billion under management of real estate. And that's a very small team. That's a very specialized business. I mean, you can think of your Goldman Sachs of the world, big asset manager, Blackstone, right?
Mm.
That's a very specialized kind of niche business. Then you have advisory, which is like most people, if you drive around a city, you're going to see billboard signs up, green signs with CBRE building for sale, right? That's typically our advisory business. Brokers, right? And then global workplace solutions, we have a lot of kind of senior managerial employees, and then we have a lot of technical employees. So we have about 70,000 of the 130,000 people. I'd say 50 plus thousand are technical services employees, right? So maintenance technicians, building engineers, and so they have very different needs from our managerial staff. So, and again, when we had maybe 5,000, maybe 7,000, the needs of that group, we could serve them in a different way than you can when it's 50,000, right? So we've developed what we call, facility management academies, technician academies, where we're training those people to accelerate their careers, right? Get certifications that are known within the industry, be a destination for talent among that group. And that's that we're starting to see benefits from that. We do have in the industry in general, there is a coming talent crunch because you've got this bifurcated talent pool. You've got an aging workforce, right? Many older technicians that are about to retire, and you've got this gap. And so we're trying to bring in younger people who are going to trade schools, community colleges, et cetera, trying to build relationships with them to show them that CBRE is a viable pathway for their career. Because most people don't know CBRE as a technical services
Right.
company. They know of us as a brokerage company, right? They see the signs out on the street and they think, that's just a brokerage company. What the heck does CBRE know about, technical services, HVAC, plumbing, right? Electrical types of things. So it's taken us a while, but we're slowly but surely educating the world that CBRE is a destination for talent for that technical services type of employee. And then on the managerial side, we've got a similar challenge in that, again, when we had 1,000, 2,000 kind of account leaders, you could train them in a different way than you can when you have 10, 15, 20,000, right? So those employees are looking for mentorship. They're looking for education. They're looking for ways to learn more about all the different tools and things that they can bring to their clients, right? So it's about client relationship building, some sales leadership, right? Because they have to know how to sell certain products, but they have to learn about those products. So
you had mentioned these two different tracks of your technical training and then also your leadership. Do they ever cross in regards to commonalities and trainings, or do they do cross training? Maybe a technical person coming up into the managerial. Do you provide those kinds of opportunities?
So absolutely, yeah. We've got several wonderful examples of people who have started off as kind of building engineers, maintenance technicians who have come up through the ranks to become facility managers, some of whom have gone on to become alliance directors, as we call it. Those are the people who lead our large corporate accounts. But one of the ways that those groups always intersect is because we always have to show value to the client, right? We have key performance indicators on cost savings, innovations, right? Building quality sorts of KPIs. And, I mean, for like, take me, for instance, I don't have a technical background, right? I came up through the transaction space. I went to business school. I mean, my wife gave me a shirt one time that said "Sir Handyman" in jest, because every time I touch anything with a wrench, it breaks, right? So, I'm not the guy to teach anybody about how to do anything with, with a wrench. But what I am good at is identifying those who are good at turning the wrench and trying to pull as much out of them as possible, all the goodness, right? And get them to share it. So yeah, there's definitely overlap. And then for those who want to move up, I encourage all of my peers to be good mentors to those people, because we find some of our best leadership talent out of that technical workforce.
Well, that's a great transition to the next question, which is about identifying talent. So how do you identify and attract top talent with specialized skills or managerial skills in the energy, oil, and gas to support CBRE's growth and strategic initiatives?
Yeah, no, it's becoming more and more of a challenge, but for our sector in particular, within this kind of energy, oil and gas, energy resources space, we do look for people who have worked for those companies before, right? So one of the things that I didn't mention at the beginning, so we've taken more of an industry sector approach to our clients, right? And so we have a financial and professional services sector, we have a healthcare sector, industrial and logistics sector, et cetera. Employees, prospects that come out of those companies, they speak the same language, right? For our sector in particular, energy and resources, they deal with dangerous products, right? Highly flammable hydrocarbons that, if you don't have a safety mindset as part of your DNA, it can be kind of risky, right? And so we always like people who have that experience. Now, we also look for a good cultural fit within our company, right? So we have what we call our RISE values: respect, integrity, service, and excellence. And we want to test that, right? We want to test that in terms of, okay, talk about experiences that you've had that for those people have tested their values, right? And how they overcame them, because we know they're going to have challenges with clients, with colleagues, et cetera. And we want people that are very trustworthy, very open and honest, but also demand excellence, right? We can't have people doing shoddy work. We can't have people taking shortcuts. We want people who are dedicated to doing good quality work. And so, we'll test that with what's the term, the type of interview, behavioral interviews, sorry. We'll do that, but then we also get a lot of people to interview people, the prospects as well, because we want a bunch of different data points. So yeah, and that's I would say consistent across all the different levels, whether it's, entry level technical resource or very senior kind of managerial resource coming in. Um, and then there is a client component too, right? So we want people who can interface well in a certain client environment, and different clients have different environments. It's kind of interesting to see that, but so we have a lot of different layers, but ultimately it's cultural fit, values fit, um, and that's basically our approach.
So you mentioned culture fit, value fit. You also mentioned speaking the language. How do you support your employees? Is there a drive for continuous learning and development? Do they have to continue their education, especially things changing all the time? What do you guys expect of your staff and your employees?
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.
And and we continue to evolve that. So we certainly have kind of base level education, like every year, certain things that we have to do in terms of our standards of business conduct. We want to make sure that people are complying with that. For a lot of our technical roles, we have gotten a lot more hands-on in terms of our what we call our competency training. So, for instance, electricians, we have this we've set up this kind of this panel board where, and we'll use Zoom, and we'll have our internal experts kind of watch what the employee is doing, and we'll have the employee go through a bunch of different tests, right? Do they know how to do what they need to do when they're at a piece of switchgear at a breaker box and they have to do maintenance, et cetera, right? So we've got things like that. We've got other safety competency verifications around things like using lifts, right? So there's these man lifts. You've probably seen them out where you've got a guy kind of in a little bucket and he's maneuvering around.
All right.
We want to make sure that everybody is trained on how to use that properly, how to lock it out. So that's one area in terms of training, in terms of the technical workforce. In terms of the managerial workforce, we've I don't know if you've heard of the ILM kind of learning management system. It's different levels, 5, 6, and 7. I think it was primarily started in the UK, but we're sending a lot of our employees through that now. And a lot of it is kind of introspective, kind of learning more about yourself, kind of where your weak points are, to allow you to then recognize that and then move forward. But yeah, we're doing a lot more than we used to. And again, I think it's all about trying to raise the level of consistency across all of our employees, right? Because we would have we'd have a lot of great people, and then we'd have some people that you'd realize are not at the level that we really needed them to. So it's kind of trying to raise everybody's level so that we provide a more consistent experience for our clients.
That makes sense. So, you had mentioned earlier that you have you're in over 100 different countries. Let's talk a little bit more about that kind of space. What strategies do you employ to foster the culture of innovation, collaboration across geographies, and even the functional lines at CBRE?
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting thing, and again, it's one of those things that's kind of evolving. We've identified that the sector model, while clients really liked it in one sense because it allowed us to go very deep in certain subject areas, and we've been in this sector model for the last 2.5 years or so. What we were losing was kind of the cross-sector pollination, right? So taking great ideas out of healthcare that you could apply to industrial, right? Or taking ideas from energy and applying it to our infrastructure and defense sector, right? So now we're creating more innovation councils. There are some already that are actually working really well in the different regions. So we have regional kind of innovation networks that meet regularly. You have ways for employees from all accounts and all sectors to, submit ideas into kind of this big funnel. You have this kind of a awards program where senior leadership will review kind of the top 10. There's like it's kind of like a Shark Tank type of thing where people come on and they do their little 90-second elevator pitch on their idea, and
Yeah.
they get ranked and all that. But it's challenging, right? And so that's within one division. And then you can imagine, well, there's great ideas in advisory, right? And how do you connect all of those together? It's I will say we don't have a secret sauce. It's become harder for sure. But the other thing we do is we try to, you know, every once in a while, and it's not cheap, but we try to have in-person events where people can connect. And I was just in Phoenix at one, a big client institute, as we call it. And it's great for our clients, but it's also great for our CBRE leadership team because we get to connect in a more relaxed setting, not on Zoom, right? And we share ideas, and that spurs other brainstorms. And so, but you can't bring thousands of people together that often. It's just too expensive.
Well, how do you get that balance though? So where you're still trying to explore those innovative ideas, but then still maintain that cohesive culture in the company across 13,000 employees in 100 countries. How do you what is the consistent culture of CBRE?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, we are a very collaborative company, right? And that's been the way ever since I joined. I mean, people genuinely want to help you when they feel like they have something to offer. A lot of people in a lot of different, and we've got all these different subject matter areas, from workplace strategy consultants to labor analytics consultants to of course our brokerage teams I mean are the experts in their real estate markets, right? And when you reach out to somebody with a problem that they feel like they can solve, I mean, they are very adamant about helping you think through that. How are we going to present it to the client? What are their pain points? What are the challenges with presenting it this way? Should we change it? Should we tweak it, this, that, and the other? I mean, that's been a consistent part of our culture ever since I joined 20 years ago, right? And it's been nice to see that hasn't changed. I will say, if that had ever changed, and if it changes in the future, I probably would think about leaving because it just, for me, it makes getting things done at our company so much easier, right?
Right.
So, that is, I would say that is one of the, and it's kind of funny, right? Because I've seen a lot of other company value acronyms out there, that some of which have collaboration in it. And I'm kind of surprised that our CEO doesn't want to add a C in our RISE values, because he talks about that a lot. He talks about, continuously improving the collaboration of our company. So yeah, I think that's one thing that we, as I think about it, I come back to, is just our ability to collaborate for the benefit of our clients is very consistent.
Yeah, if you added C to your RISE, it becomes cries. So it may not actually work really well. So that would make sense, right?
Right. Yeah. Probably not going to add the C.
Yeah. Well, you and I have talked about succession planning on various occasions. So let's talk a little bit about succession planning. How does CBRE ensure that qualified internal candidates are ready to take on leadership roles within this large global space?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's one that we, again, similar to my original statement, what got us here won't get us there, right? But
Yeah.
we we use a 6 box, right? So we've got a 6 box methodology, which I'm sure everybody on the call knows how that is used.
They may
Um,
not. So if you could get, some people may not know what 6 box. Can you explain what a 6 box tool is?
oh, sure, yeah. So if you think about it, kind of a 2 by 3 grid with in the upper right are kind of the high performing, high potential people. On the bottom right, you have high performing, um, I wouldn't say low potential, but not interested in kind of moving out of their current role. And then as you move back towards the left, you've got bottom left, kind of low performing, low potential, and you can kind of figure out how the rest gets filled in, right? So we assess all of our, I would say, more kind of senior leaders on accounts and up every year. We talk about talent all the time, right? Because that is, I think, as I mentioned, right, we don't make widgets, we don't have IP, we have people, and our growth is only as good as our people. So always talking about, what are, what types of clients our different talent would be a good fit for. Um, and, are they, what sort of experiences do they need to kind of round them out if they want to progress through the 6 boxes to get to that upper right quadrant? What things do we need to do? How do we make their career trajectory intentional? Um, and yeah, it's a continuously evolving process, but one that is critical to our success with continuing to grow. So
What's your criteria for identifying high potentials?
yeah, so I mean, another phrase that comes to mind is, people have to bloom where they're planted.
Mm,
And
mm.
so, they've got to excel in whatever role they're in. So they have to be knocking it out of the park in their current role, whatever that is. They have to show interest in other parts of the business. They have to show genuine interest in their client success. They have to show genuine interest in people. And I mean, frankly, they're not going to be knocking it out of the park if they aren't interested in the well-being of people and the people around them, their clients, et cetera. So it kind of goes hand in hand, right?
Right, right, right.
Um, they have to, and to be knocking it out of the park, they have to be doing excellent work, which means that, there aren't errors in the calculations that they're doing. There aren't big gaps in whatever presentations, right? Um, they're consultative, right? They're asking a lot of different people for opinions and insight and input. Um, so, and then they have to be easy to work with. That's something
Hmm.
that is kind of missed
Yeah,
a lot of times, right? And that's our culture. Now that, for a lot of other companies, like, it's a different culture, right? And
right.
some cultures are very challenging, right? Like it's expected that you will challenge intellectually certain ideas, certain concepts, and it's just expected, right? For our company, yes, that you need to be challenging it, but you have to do it in a certain way where, you know, um, people still like you, right? And they still want to
Hmm.
work with you. Whereas
Right.
in some cases, if someone really, really challenges you and keeps going after, like, man, I don't want to ever see that person again. So, but that's just our culture. So I hope
So
that
you
helps.
were mentioning about people who are knocking it out of the park, right? And one of the challenges of succession planning is that you may knock it out of the park in one arena, but then you take that same person, you put them in another arena, they just don't knock it out of the park. How do
Right.
you test for that, or do you test for that?
Yeah. So oftentimes, like, let's take one example of, you've got an account and you've got an opportunity to add, say, another site, right? A smaller site. There's some expansion, right? And so say you want to kind of test the person on either, pricing or responding to an RFP or a transition, right? Actually doing a transition where you're taking on new services, you're taking on new people, you're having to work with a new client or whatever, but it's not a big account. It's kind of a small piece of a current account. That's a way to kind of test them, right? You can
I
kind of
see.
push them in and say, you're going to be running this expansion,
Right.
go do it, right? So it's lower risk. I mean, there's still certainly some risk with it.
There's a
But those are
safety
the
net.
types of things that, you want to test somebody to just see how they do.
Yep.
And that's what I mean, now there's some instances where all of a sudden, boom, we've got some big new account. We don't have time to test. It's like, okay, let's sink or swim. Good luck. But that's usually not a recipe for success, right? We want to make sure that we have, proven leaders who jump into a new piece of work before just throwing them into the deep end. So
So one of the philosophical questions always about succession planning is from the whole ideas of Jack Welch and GE, tell or don't tell. So do you guys tell? Do you tell somebody that they're on a succession plan or do you not?
that is such a great question. And to be honest, at this point, I think I'm on more on the side of don't tell.
Huh. Really?
Um, gosh, it's so hard because I've been through both, and um, even when we were telling our clients, like we want our clients to agree on who a successor is, right? So that it makes it easier to transition a current leader over to some new opportunity and bring in another leader who the client already knows, right? Well, the problem is then how this evolved was that we are required to do diverse interview panels for all certain senior leadership positions. And so
Right.
then we got into this quandary of, well, wait a minute, clients already endorsed this person to be the successor. they're
Mm,
they were diverse, which was great, but yet we still had to run them through this panel.
right.
And the client was very confused, like, wait a minute, why do we have to wait to move this person over because you have to do this interview panel? I don't understand, right? So, it's funny. I haven't really thought about that question in quite a while until you just brought it up. So I'm torn. I'm obviously torn on what to do. One of my leaders in the past he was all about having what he called Rockies, ready now, on account, client endorsed successors, right?
Hmm.
ROC.
Okay.
And it's like, yeah, it makes total sense, right? Because it allows better mobility of the talent that we so desperately need if we want to keep growing. But then you have your hands tied a little bit when and not, I mean, I love our diverse interview panel process. It works very, very well. So on the other hand, I'm kind of like, well, and you also find talent that you didn't know existed that comes in to apply, right? If you put a posting out there, sometimes that talent you feel like might be better than that client endorsed successor that
Right.
you've identified. So
Yep.
there's pros and cons.
Um, so it's all of that evaluation is all tied to performance, right? So what mechanisms do you have in place to be able to capture, assess, and evaluate the talent at CBRE?
Yeah, so we have a tool that we call Talent Coach. I don't know the underlying software, to be honest. It may be an Oracle software. I don't think it is though. But like most companies, you input your goals, and that's all well and good. But for us, the biggest factor is tracking against those goals frequently, right? I would say minimum quarterly. You want the employee to be inputting into the tool what the progress is. We've got a little slider bar that shows kind of percent progress. You can upload attachments, etc. And you want the manager to also be inputting, say, hey, John did a great job with this assignment. The client gave a lot of kudos about it, and doing it more in real time, because the last thing that you want is any surprises at the end of the year
Right.
with the performance review process. And so, we expect people to be in that tool frequently. I mean, not daily, right? I mean, you don't have progress against an annual goal on a daily basis, but I'd say at least quarterly. And then we have, of course, a performance rating, 1 through 5, 1 being basically did not meet any goals, 5 being wildly exceeded expectations. We have probably more of what's not distended bell curve, but a skewed bell curve towards the 3 and the 4 side of things. But and then everybody gets kind of ranked against each other, and that's how we use that's what we use in terms of merit and bonus planning. So.
Oh, what do? You as John Richard, the manager, what do you do to support somebody, one of your employees, who may be falling behind in their performance objectives? What's your philosophy around that?
Yeah, no, it's pretty straightforward in that, look, I need a plan, right, for how this performance objective is gonna be met. Um, and it's one of those where, okay, if I see a problem and someone gives me a plan that is pretty comprehensive in terms of how that problem is going to be solved, and if they're moving at pace to solve it, I'm good. If they have a plan, but they're not moving at pace, and it's something where, it's important for the client's starting to see it, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to be helping you, right? I'm going to be holding your hand, and I'm going to be making sure that we get what's needed for the client. If the person is still not performing, then I'm moving pretty quickly to find somebody else to take on that role. I could carve off that performance objective to somebody else, leaving the other ones there for the person to do. Or I may move more quickly to look to actually, replace that person. But it's in my role, usually the people reporting to me are pretty senior, and any deficiencies in their performance have big, ripple effects in terms of client satisfaction. And there's going to be a lot of pressure to make a change to improve that situation, either from the client directly, from my management, from peers, etc. So, yeah, that's pretty much how I've done it in the past, and I think how I will have to do it continuing forward. So,
Well, that makes sense. So I visited you guys, a couple of weeks ago. So we're going to move into more about remote and distributed teams. And so I know that you have a very lovely office and your home, which my mother tends to take over when we visit. So thank you, by the way. You had talked about your team and how important it is for them to meet their metrics. How do you manage and support remote teams, especially since you work remotely? I'm assuming they're working remotely. How do you do that, especially in this global nature? People are working at different time zones, your real strong drive for collaboration. What's your strategy around that?
Yeah. So, we do have a lot of on-site teams. So when it comes to our client locations, there are people on site every day, right? Doing the hard work that they have to do. In terms of just information sharing, making sure that we're aligned on goals, we rely on technologies like this. It's kind of amazing how, I don't know what we would have done before Zoom. I frankly can't remember what we did before Zoom. I think there was that old, intercall system, right, with the conference call thing that you would dial in, and then you'd hear all the bleeps and the bloops and everybody joining, 100 beeps. But that still doesn't replace FaceTime, right?
Yep.
So when I was in a prior role and managing a big account team in the Americas, I made it a point to get to certain sites 2 or 3 times a year, right? And hear from the employees, feed back to them things that we were doing to try to make their lives easier and better. And just listening to their concerns, and just going to lunch, right? And just letting them talk about their families and the great things that are happening in their lives, and being a real showing that you're a real person, that you're not just some automaton kind of
Talking head.
talking head. Yeah.
Right.
um so that to me was always really, really important. And then being there when they needed help. So I mean, for several times, our teams in the Gulf Coast got hammered by hurricanes, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so some of them personally, they lost their houses or had damage to their houses and were living out of hotels and all this stuff. And so we at Seabury, we have a great foundation called Seabury Cares, and we were able to give those people some donations to help with living
cool.
expenses, help actually start rebuilding their homes. And I, personally made pleas to some of the people running those foundations to make sure that those people got their money. And so anyway, it's just leading with what's called a servant's heart, right? And serve, to me at different times, it's, yes, I'm serving the client. In many cases, I'm serving the employees that are working for me, right?
That's great.
So,
So, working from home can also be challenging in regards to work-life balance, right? So, how do you ensure that you yourself have that work-life balance so that you're not overlapping your hours from the middle of the night, and also that your team is?
yeah. I've kind of found my formula. I unlike my wife, who can sit at a desk for like 10 hours straight and not move. Um, I know I have to get up and move. I have to be physically active. I try to exercise, every day, if not every other day. Um, but I also know that some nights I'm going to have to be on calls with Asia. Some mornings I'm going to be on calls super early. And so I strike that balance, right? I'll work for 3 or 4 hours at a stretch, go exercise a little bit, step out of the house, do some errands. Um, and I encourage my people to do the same thing. I also, on my email footer, I saw one of my colleagues put this that said, my working hours may not be your working hours. Please don't feel obligated to respond to an email from me if it's outside of your working hours. And I really want people to know that they do not need to feel obligated to respond to him. Even if I'm their boss, their boss's boss, their boss's boss's boss, whatever, right? Do not feel obligated to respond to me if it's outside of your working hours, because that's really sacred, right? And it's key, because people who, they're going to be more effective when they're working if they have a good work-life balance, right? If they've been able to go exercise, if they've been able to go cook a meal for their family, right? Um, so I strongly encourage that. And I'll tell someone if it's becoming noticeable, right? If it looks like they're more stressed at work with whatever, I'm like, hey, let's talk. Let's get off this Zoom. Let's talk just one-on-one. I want to make sure that you're okay. What can I do to help you? Do you need some time off? We can try to, backfill, support you with Susie, Kelly, whatever. There's a way. Don't feel like it's all on you, right? We've got a big team. We've got 130,000 people, right? So, yeah, no, it's a really good question, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. Again, because if people aren't taking care of themselves, then they can't take care of our clients. So
Absolutely. Which means that it's almost time to get up. So we'll be wrapping it up right now.
you probably saw me shift. I was like, oh, ouch.
And I've been doing that all. It's funny because you're talking about getting up and moving around. I have a treadmill right next to my desk that I think just collects more dust than it does me on it. So I hear you. I really need to find that balance as well. But let's wrap up with some future focus ideas.
Okay.
So I know that you were just here yesterday, actually, for the conference that you called, I think it was Client Institute,
Institute, Client
Client
Institute,
Institute.
yes,
And
CBRE Institute.
I remember we had talked about this, that it's the theme was the future is now,
The
right?
future now, yes, that's
The
what it
future
was.
now.
Uh-huh.
So what are some exciting things that you see in the future, whether it's about talent, it's about CBRE? What are some exciting future things that you see?
Yeah, I mean, in our space with, buildings and facilities, we have a big focus on what we call smart FM, right? So
Mm,
doing a lot more with building sensors, building technology, integrating all that. And I think it's really cool for our workforce in the buildings, those technicians who are getting smarter about technology. And with AI coming out in such a big way, I honestly can't predict, you know, more than a year or two. Probably I doubt I can even predict that far, kind of what AI is going to bring to our industry.
right.
But I know that building technology is going to really accelerate in terms of the benefits, what it can bring to our profession, to our clients, and that's a big focus area for us. Um, Sustainability is also a big focus area that's tied into the smart building technology, right? So if you think
Hmm.
about the building operations and trying to reduce the carbon footprint of a building, it's all very related. And with all the regulations that are coming out, this kind of patchwork of regulations around carbon reporting, um, the things that we're putting in place, that we're investing in terms of data collection, in terms of dashboard technology, reporting technology, et cetera. Um, I think it's going to be a real differentiator for us, and something that our clients may not know that they need, but they're going to need it
Mm.
because these regulations are coming fast and furious, and but it's also good for the planet, right? I mean, we need to definitely decarbonize because climate change is really accelerating, I think.
Yeah, when that's obvious when there's 92 degrees in Dallas in January or February,
Yeah, I know it broke a record. Yeah.
right? Yeah.
So,
Any closing statements that you'd like to share with our listeners?
um, no, I don't know exactly the audience for this, but for people that are working in large companies like CBRE, and as you think about talent, really think about ways that um, you can kind of cross-pollinate learning, right? And do it at
Mm,
do it at a scale, or do it at scale. I mean, that's to me, that's something that um, I'm realizing is frankly an inhibitor for our growth. There was a really great article that I read in the Harvard Business Review by a Harvard Business School professor named Ryan Buell,
mm,
and it was about a learning program that KPMG had developed. There's a man named Christian Gossan, Gossan, who's based in Australia. They developed this game. They basically gamified learning, and they created a product called Globe Runner that helped, their 200,000 plus people learn about the company's offerings in a way that was kind of fun.
right.
So that's something that I'm trying to figure out, oh, could we do that at CBRE, right? We've done it in little fits and starts here and there, but I just found that to be kind of, my mind just exploded when I was like, oh, yeah, of course, that makes total sense. But anyway, coming full circle, for everybody, just think about better ways that you can educate your labor force, because, for those in a services industry, right? I mean, your assets are your people. And the more you can do to, enhance those assets. And I mean, it's kind of crude to talk about people as assets, but they really are. The more you can do to enhance your people in that regard, the better off you're going to be. So I'll leave it at that.
Fantastic. Well, John, thank you again so much for your time and for agreeing to be on our podcast. My team and I are excited to share all of your insights. And with that, we'll sign off.
All right. Thank you so much. This was a real pleasure.
Great. Thank you.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE One Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now